Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, esteemed speakers, everyone here, and not forgetting those who are joining us offsite, welcome to the afternoon session of Forum Economy Malaysia FEM 2025. I trust that the morning session was insightful and that you are refreshed for an exciting discussions ahead. A reminder that any questions for the Q&A sessions throughout the afternoon will be taken through Slido. You can find the QR code embedded at the back of your participant tags. My name is Amira Azmi from Maybank, and I am honored to serve as your host for today. It is with great pleasure that we welcome familiar and fresh faces alike to join us in unraveling today's theme, Seizing Malaysia's Moment. Today, we have an exceptional lineup of speakers, industry experts, and visionary leaders who will be sharing their insights, experiences, and strategies to address the opportunities and challenges shaping Malaysia's economic and social development. To kick things off, our first panel discussion will focus on ASEAN dynamism, which will explore topics relating to Malaysia taking over the ASEAN chairmanship this year, access to markets and bloc relations, among others. Please join me in giving a big round of applause to our distinguished panelists, Yang Berhormat Datuk Sri Muhammad Khalid Nordin, Minister of Defence. Yang Berbahagia Datuk Muhammad Umar Swift, CEO Bursa Malaysia. Dr. Guani Lim, Associate Professor, National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, Japan. Mrs. Alina Noor, Senior Fellow, Asia Program, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Moderating the session is Mr. Nazmi Idrus, Head of Economics, CGS International. Mr. Nazmi, the floor is yours.
Hello. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the afternoon session. Now, the challenge that I have today is to keep you guys' attention because you guys just have a big lunch. But I promise you, this session is going to be very interesting. Now, the topic that we're given is ASEAN Dynamics. And when you talk about ASEAN Dynamics, basically, we're going to delve a lot about issues of economics and foreign relations. If you think about Malaysia, despite Malaysia being a small country, I think that Malaysia has been quite proactive and also have been quite vocal on the global stage. If you look at Malaysia with respect to its political affiliations, and you can see Malaysia has been very active with respect to its involvements within ASEAN. Malaysia has also been active in OIC, the Commonwealth, and quite recently, BRICS. If you look at Malaysia from the economic perspective as well, you can see that Malaysia has been very active in a lot of trade agreements. For example, we are in ASEAN FTAs. We are also in CPTPP, RCEP, and also quite recently, IPEF, IPEF. Now, if you were to ask me, I would say Malaysia, if you to summarize Malaysia foreign relations, it has always been quite pragmatic. In a sense that if you look at Malaysia, how we deal with other countries is that we always ensure that we fulfill our security and economic objectives. So we don't have any other ulterior motives. And because of that, I would say that Malaysia is basically friendly to everybody. Having said that, I think times are changing. And I think this year especially with a few key issues that is lingering, for instance, if you look at in terms of the US now, is that we're having a change in leadership with the US, so the foreign relations could be a bit more volatile. We also have a more assertive China with respect to the issue over South China Sea. And also within ASEAN itself, we know the crisis over Myanmar and also the Rohingya refugees still remain unresolved. So I think now is a good time for us to take a review about Malaysia economic and foreign relations. And to do that, we have a list of panel speakers that we have today. If I can introduce again the list of panel speakers, we have none other than Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri Khalid Nordin, which is the Minister of Defence, followed by Dato' Omar Swift, which is the CEO of Bursa. This is followed by Dr. Guania Lim. She's the Associate Professor for National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies based in Tokyo. And finally, we have none other than Mr. Lina Noor, which is a Senior Fellow Asia Program at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which is based in Washington. Now, let me explain to you the flow of this session. I will ask a series of questions to the panelists, and you have access to the QR code for Slido, and I do encourage you to ask questions because this is your opportunity to actually get inputs from the government itself, and also we have a list of panel experts here as well. Now, just to kick off the discussion, this morning Anwar has mentioned about the ASEAN chairmanship where Malaysia is taking over from Laos. And that brings up a lot of hope, I would say, because not least because Malaysia is a founding member, also because Malaysia have, I would say, quite a unique relationship with the rest of ASEAN members and also the global powers as well. But let me just start easy first. The theme for ASEAN chairmanship this year is inclusivity and sustainability. So perhaps maybe YB, can you explain to us what that theme means and what is it that the government plans to do with the chairmanship this year?
Thank you, Saudara Moderator. Assalamualaikum and a very good day to all. Firstly, I would like to thank the organizer for having me today. I'm the Minister of Defense talking in an economic forum on ASEAN. It's like I'm in a firing squad. Anyway, yes, this year we are going to take the role of ASEAN chairmanship. One thing that we realize is that it is not a mere rotational mandate. As you know, for Malaysia, we are the founding nations of ASEAN. We believe that ASEAN is an asset, not only to our country, but also to the world economy. Therefore, for Malaysia, we take ASEAN very seriously. We must make sure ASEAN thrive, and we must ensure that we can bring up ASEAN to greater heights. That is why, referring to your question, that is why we choose our team when we are the chairman of ASEAN on inclusivity and sustainability. This is because we want to seize the opportunity during our chairmanship. We want to see ASEAN to be more than a political dialogue among leaders. We accept the fact that since its inception, ASEAN has evolved into a formidable bloc. It has demonstrated its economic potential, attracting investment, collaboration, making it as one of the most promising economic regions in the world. More importantly, ASEAN has managed to ensure that this region remains stable, peaceful, as well as safe for all. Therefore, after decades of its inception, Malaysia aspires to see ASEAN evolve, not just politically, but economically as well as socially, embodying our shared aspiration for peace, stability, as well as prosperity. Therefore, we wish to seize this opportunity to garner momentum for us to move further. We want to ensure that the benefits of economic growth and social well-being will really be felt by all citizens that are within ASEAN. And apart from that, we choose this theme because we want to ensure that the aspiration and impact of our chairmanship can be continued post our chairmanship year. And we believe that by making ASEAN more inclusive and sustainable, bringing about economic development as well as prosperity, that will give strength to ASEAN, that will make ASEAN more relevant. And with that situation, I believe everybody will continue to ensure the relevance of ASEAN, and ASEAN will be able to meet all the dynamics and challenges that we are going to face now as well as in future. So that's why we choose the theme, inclusivity as well as sustainability.
Right, right. So you mentioned just now that you don't want ASEAN to be just a talk show, right? What perhaps the key hurdles that you think that's going to be quite difficult to tackle, at least for chairmanship for this year?
Well, I believe the different rate of development among the ASEAN countries, the diversity and all those things, we believe that we cannot see the results very fast. It is a continuous work. It is a work that is very heavy, and we have to continue.
Okay. So perhaps, okay, let me twist this question in a different way. So from MINDEF perspective itself, where do you think MINDEF have plans for this year itself?
Well, we are to ensure that this region is peaceful, stable. You know, if you look at all the other regions in the world, all conflicts are between neighbors. And you can see that the 10 countries within ASEAN, we are at peace with each other. We have border agreement, we have high-level committee meetings, we have meetings every year. And in fact, I think we can see when Malaysia is now the chairmanship, there will be more than 300 over meetings. So that is where I believe why I'm asked also to come as a Minister of Defense, not directly related to economy, but it is relevant because we are to ensure that this region is peaceful, so that whatever plan that you have to develop the economy, it can be implemented.
Right, right. So basically you mean that you must have security before you have economic growth. Okay. So perhaps I ask with respect to Dr. Umar, now the Malaysia's ASEAN chairmanship coincide with the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint 2025, which is the final year of implementation. And within that AEC, one of the goals was to have integrated capital markets within ASEAN. Now, with this final year, how has the development been so far, and where do you think that there are gaps that needs to be addressed?
Thanks, Nazmi. Always like a question we've not prepared for. And Muhammad, and fellow panelists, I think the key thing is, this is the exciting, I'm going to digress since I've got the mic, Nazmi. 2025 final year, Malaysia has a unique opportunity to write the next 5-year plan. we've not achieved all we hope to have achieved. But when we look at it from the exchange's perspective, and as young Ahmed Rahmat touched on this morning, ASEAN will develop to be the 4th largest trading bloc. However, that being said, we need to be inclusive and it needs to be sustainable. And when we look at it from a capital market perspective, and that's debt as well as equity, each country we have to recognise has a different point of development. Each country has its own sovereign rights. So as we look at our capital markets, it has to be right for need. So from an exchange perspective, we celebrate, if you like, what is common, not what is different. We look for points of commonality. And if you like, what we've been working upon is we use the platform which is ASEAN Exchanges, which is, so it's not at ministerial level, it is actually at a, if you like, a private commercial level, which means we can be a little bit more agile because we have a slightly different protocol. And we are driving commonality, or if you like, we begin to drive a common capital market through conversations where we look at standards, taxonomy, language. So when a foreign investor looks at us as a group, yes, market rules may be different, but actually what they're investing in and what they're looking at, they know those figures are correct, they know the language is the same. And so we accept we cannot be the European Union today, but what we can begin to build is a common language and common standards. So I'm happy to say, as we go forward, and we're focusing very much on carbon. So sustainability is, of course, so much more than carbon, but we recognise that our region needs to trade. We're a trading region. We're intermediate manufacturers for the rest of the world. And provenance is going to become more and more important for the people who buy our product. And as we go forward, we at the exchanges, funnily enough, are focusing on SMEs and MSMEs, despite, if you like, our key stakeholder being listed corporations, because we think in terms of the whole ecosystem, which gets back to that theme of inclusivity. So from an exchange perspective, we wish to leave no one behind, because when you leave no one behind, everyone prospers.
Okay, so interesting. You mentioned about sustainability and you also mentioned about the carbon market. Perhaps you could share with us how has, because as far as I understand, Bursa has implemented the voluntary carbon market not a long time ago. How has that developed, and would you be able to share how we compare to the ASEAN region in general, and also perhaps with respect to the global carbon objectives?
I think my team will cringe because I can see them in the room. Cakap tak serupa dengan bikin. What do I mean by that? So when we were building the voluntary carbon market, and we were, it was a, if you like, we did this with government. This is something that needed to be done to begin to prepare for CBAM and actually raise the awareness around carbon and carbon reporting. All the corporates said, yes, this is a wonderful idea, we will support you. Actually, they didn't. And when I compare notes with my colleagues in Indonesia, Thailand, it's the same. And I think as we see the development of the carbon market, there is going to be, the voluntary carbon market, I tend to think in terms of impact projects, not so much the voluntary carbon market. We're going to see something very similar to Thailand, which will be a development of domestic standards throughout the region. We're working to ensure they're common and see a convergence of markets. But ultimately, as Malaysia has ambitions and needs to meet its NDC requirements, we will move to cap and trade. And this is a conversation I have with YB Nick Nazmi. And you will actually see a convergence of the voluntary market with the compliance market. The compliance market and cap and trade provides pricing signals to the voluntary market. And in there somewhere is your carbon tax, which was announced in the last federal budget. And that's important because we're beginning to educate. Now, we like cap and trade as a house because we see it as a progressive structure to drive better outcomes. So you reward people who beat their target. But we also think there needs to be, in our mind, the construct for cap and trade involves input from industry as well as from MRES. And underlying it all is just energy transition, which then brings in petro as well. So I think that's another stream in a different room. But just energy transition for ASEAN is fundamentally important as well.
Right, right. Okay, so we talk about capital markets just now, but maybe we go a bit further and talk about trade in general. As you know, with the US changing leadership, and in fact, you know, Trump actually been threatening to impose tariff on all his trading partners. Now, I don't want to talk about tariffs specifically, but I want to talk about how we should navigate this difficult relationship with the US. So this question is perhaps to you, Elena. How do you think ASEAN should navigate these next few years, given that we're probably going to be having a bit more volatile relationships with the US?
Thanks, Nazmi. I think it's a telling sign of the times when you have a very mixed panel up here at an economic forum. So YB, you're not the only one who feels a little awkward on this panel. But thank you for not making this question all about tariffs. I think we're in a very different place than we were maybe 10, 20 years ago. And that might be stating the obvious, but let me tell you why. Because your question was about tariffs and trade. But we're in the age of the securitization of the economy in general. And so whereas we in ASEAN have always had the luxury of segmenting the economy from the political, from the security and the defense. In fact, the ASEAN pillars are segmented that way. We no longer have that privilege of considering each of those pillars separately because of what's going on in the US and China, what's going on between them. But also, it provides us with an opportunity to put a stamp in the direction that we want ASEAN to go in. In the past, I think if I may be blunt, we've been a little laid back about our position. And we talk a lot about trade and ASEAN's economic potential. But we haven't really figured out where it is we want to take ASEAN to in the next 50 years. Yes, we have strategies, we have plans, we have master plans, plenty of them. But really, you and I were just talking, we're almost bit players in this major competition between the US and China. We are no longer living in the US's world. It's not a Trump world and we're just actors in it. I think this is our opportunity to really strike a mark and take ASEAN to greater places, as YB said. But what does that mean? That means diversifying strategically. It means some of the measures that the government has already begun taking in its ASEAN chairmanship. It means having the GCC and China at the same table at an ASEAN meeting. It should also mean talking to partners that we don't always ordinarily talk to, like the Pacific Islands Forum, like partners in Africa, in Latin America. Language shouldn't be a barrier. We all speak English after all. And so I think we need to be thinking more creatively about engaging with what might be called the global south, but what I prefer to call the global majority, because our concerns are very similar. We've always modeled our sense of development on the north, on the west. And again, if I may be bold, I think that period has served us well, but maybe we need to look elsewhere.
Okay, all right, that interesting part you mentioned about the global south. We're going to touch on that a bit later. But just keeping on the trade topic now, so perhaps Dr. Guani, I want to point out a very interesting fact. If you look at in terms of US and China trade balance over the past several years, it actually has been declining because of the trade war. But on the other hand, we saw the trade balance of ASEAN against the US actually has been growing over the past several years. And if trade deficit is a reason for the Trump administration to be very, warlike, very trying to impose tariff on other countries, then perhaps ASEAN is the direct, will be in line for the firing range, right? So do you think that should ASEAN be more concerned now, given that our trade balance has been increasing, or do you believe that this is actually just a temporary factor?
Thank you, Nazmi, and thank you for making time. Well, firstly, that is a risk, right? But it's not specific to ASEAN, right? And even within ASEAN, some countries are, they don't face that fire that much. So it's not specific to us, right? There are quite a few economies who are stuck in the same, dilemma. So, as far as Malaysia is concerned, and I'm speaking largely from an economics point of view, right? If you took a straw poll, right, all of us here, about 100 of us, right? If I ask you, what are the three biggest risks that our country face, right? I think a lot of your concerns are not directly related to the trade wars. Yes, it's concerning what is happening in the States and China, but a lot of it we can still control, right? That's what I believe, and it's more important for us to get our house in order. And once we get it in order, we can navigate it a bit better. But of course, I'm not very familiar with the PIF thing that you mentioned, lah. So that is my understanding, lah, purely from an economics point of view, lah. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So Dr. Umar, maybe just a quick response to this. From capital market perspective, how do you see the tariff risk that is happening right now? Should companies be more worried about it, or how should they navigate this challenge?
There's a lot of debate, of course, Nazmi. Our overall thinking as we engage businesses is Malaysia, the region as a whole, can actually benefit. But we have to be mindful and savvy and look at how we navigate it. By nature, we're neutral, and as Dr. Chris Miller said this morning, neutrality is difficult, but it can be done. So as we look at what our constituents on the stock market, as well as our businesses, as well as those that are not listed, China Plus One works, and it has been a benefit. As we go forward, we are confident that we can navigate the tariff situation as well. Yesterday we had a small company list. It does photovoltaic cells. It listed at a 25% premium to its offer price. Why? Because it's a Malaysian-based company doing solar cells. It's clearly a winner. Rubber gloves, winner. And of course there are those that also may have impact on the other side, but net, we actually see a potential opportunity.
Right. Okay. So your summary is basically positive for Malaysia. Right. So I want to move on to a topic which is BRICS. As you know, Malaysia has been a partner country for BRICS alongside Thailand. If you look at in terms of ASEAN as a whole, Vietnam has been asked to be a partner country, and quite recently, even Indonesia has been a member country. And so you can see that there seems to be a shift towards strengthening ties with the BRICS or the Global South in general. In fact, if you look at Prime Minister Anwar last year, when his visit to Kazan, he even invited Putin to the East Asia Summit this year. So it seems that Malaysia right now has started to cozy up with the Global South, or to Russia in general. Now, my question is to you, YB. What do you think about this move by Anwar to cozying up with Russia, and is there a recalibration of a foreign policy?
Thank you for your question. On Russia, I think Russia is no stranger to the East Asia Summit because in 2005, we are the first to invite them to be an observer. Despite all this move, being close to Russia, or even the idea of joining BRICS, we wish to reiterate that there is no shift in our foreign policy towards taking side to anyone. We remain neutral based on our principle of being friendly with like-minded countries through our converging interests. On BRICS, yes, recently we have been admitted to be the country partner, whereas Indonesia was admitted as a member. But we initially they have accepted us as a country partner, and there are many reasons why we joined BRICS. Firstly, because as we all are aware, Malaysia is a trading nation. The more trading partners we have, I think it is better for our economy. Joining BRICS will allow Malaysia to access to a bigger and emerging market. We know that BRICS represent 45% of world population with 28% global economy. Therefore, I believe that we cannot ignore the potential that BRICS offer to Malaysia. So by joining BRICS, it offers not only economic opportunity, but collaboration on many crucial aspects. For instance, climate change intervention, research and development in emerging technologies and best practices. Secondly, we must be very clear that by joining BRICS does not mean that we are now leaving our traditional trading partners, like the USA, the EU, and the rest. We are not leaving dollar-based trading and transaction. We are not dismantling anything. It's not that if we choose BRICS, then we are giving away with other relationship that we have before. So this is something that we need to clear in the minds of everybody. We are simply adding more collaboration to have more diverse and strategic option. We can simply rely on the status quo and refuse to seize the opportunity offered by other potential and big markets. We are not doing that. So therefore, joining BRICS align with both our foreign policy and ASEAN principle, which is to be neutral and to engage with all, so long as it brings benefit to our country.
All right, thank you very much. So perhaps this question is to you, Dr. Goni. With Malaysia joining BRICS alongside Thailand and Indonesia, and even Vietnam is invited, that seems to be, like if you look at ASEAN as a whole, there seems to be a split of countries joining BRICS and countries that are still pro-Western. For example, Singapore is very pro-Western and the Philippines is actually a very strong US ally. How do you think Singapore and Philippines are going to react to a lot more ASEAN members joining the BRICS and them staying on the course of very, very pro-Western countries? Yeah. Yes, please.
All right, thank you. First of all, right, I think this echoes Minister's comment about BRICS, is that it's something that is in our interest. And this is based on current dynamic, right? Some other countries in ASEAN, they may have some reservations, but we have bigger common overlapping interests, right? So just because of one issue that maybe I don't really agree, that kind of things, right? It doesn't undo all the good work, all the goodwill. And as was mentioned before, we work on consensus, right? A lot of bincang, talk slowly, talk nicely. And I think if you use this dynamic, things will smoothen itself. Maybe not now, but in maybe 1 or 2 years, things will be better, right? And I think one of the things that I think we do quite well is that, firstly, do no harm, right? Us joining BRICS does no harm. In fact, it actually does something quite good for us. We get to diversify trade, even though the trade complementary is not very high at this stage, but that may change in the future. If you remember many years ago, during, I think it was the Abdullah Badawi admin, right? We were aggressively trying to sell durians to the Chinese. I don't know if you remember the episode. Nowadays, it's a very, very mature trade. Huh? Those days, people were laughing. It's like, why are you selling durians to people who don't eat durians? Now you cannot get your best durian already. Huh? They love it. Huh? So this change, taste change, even you and I, we also change. So that is something to look forward to. For that, I'm quite optimistic. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So this question is to you, Ms. Elena. Perhaps a bit tough question, I would say. Do you think that countries should be allowed to trade with whomever they want, irrespective of their moral values? I'm asking this with respect to Russia, because as you know, you can say arguably that Russia is an imperialist because of the occupation over Ukraine. And why are we still having economic relations with such countries? And do you think it's justified?
We've traded with imperialists before. We continue to trade with ongoing imperial powers. So the short answer to your question is, yes, countries should trade with whomever they want. They have to answer, in the case of Malaysia, we have to answer to ourselves, our conscience and our people. Are we comfortable trading with occupying powers? Are we comfortable trading with powers that masquerade as democracies but continue to oppress others? And these are tough questions that we're asking ourselves now. You know, the whole, I'm sure many of you will recall a few months ago, the fracas over BlackRock. I don't know if that question has been resolved, but this is why I say we can no longer afford to consider economic trade, commercial issues as separately from more strategic ones. Because we've been lectured too about values and morals and rules, but we've seen that crumble before our eyes if we weren't already aware of that hypocrisy. And I think this is the exact moment where we are at an inflection point to ask ourselves, okay, are we going to be guided by whatever values and morals we hold, and if so, what are they? And this is a good opportunity for Malaysia as ASEAN chair to reflect on our principles and values. We talk about principles a lot in our foreign policy. We're also pragmatic. But how far is that going to take us? So I gave you a very direct answer. Yes, we should trade with whomever we want in our interest. But we also need to think a little more reflectively about what undergirds that decision.
Right, all right, thank you very much. So I want to move on to a different topic now. We're going to talk about China. Right, recently we heard China being more assertive. They are being, you can see that China Coast Guard has been very, the presence has been quite evident in even south to Sarawak shores. And perhaps this question is to you, IB. Seeing that Malaysia is acting as both claimant of the South China Sea and now the chairmanship for ASEAN, what will be the main agenda that Malaysia will push this year?
I will answer this related to the South China Sea and our relationship with China. First, I would like to take the opportunity to say that Malaysia's claim in the South China Sea is firm and non-negotiable. Okay? We understand that the stakes have never been higher for incident between South China Sea claimant states. There are many overlapping claims in South China Sea, not only between Malaysia and China, but between our neighbors, Vietnam, Philippines, among those countries. But we all agree that no one can afford for South China Sea to become a theater of conflict, in line with the ASEAN principle of ZOPFAN, Zone of Peace and Neutrality. One thing that because we have this engagement and dialogue, we agree to exercise self-restraint among all countries. And by taking over the chairmanship of ASEAN, one of our main agenda is to see that there is a speedy conclusion of the code of conduct needed in order to maintain peace and stability in South China Sea. So to this end, we hope to see some movement. We cannot be too optimistic because this code of conduct is not only between ASEAN and China, but among member countries within ASEAN.
But sorry, if we do respect, the code of conduct for the South China Sea has been going on for the longest time. And it seems that even though we've been pushing for the code of conduct, China continued to be assertive on South China Sea, putting up artificial islands. So it does seem like we've been pushing a story that is not really going to work, if I would say so myself. I'm asking this because if you look at, for instance, Vietnam, right? Vietnam right now has become more assertive. They actually even built their own artificial islands within the South China Sea. And from your perspective, do you think that Malaysia should pursue such avenue? Should we actually militarize our own assets in the South China Sea?
Some areas we do build our own platform, and some areas in which there are overlapping claims, we have our oil platform. Okay? And under the law, international law of the sea, what we need to do firstly is to have our show of presence. That is why we can see a lot of China vessels in the South China Sea. And we also will send our ship. The most important thing is that we do show our presence in all those areas in which there are overlapping claims. And secondly, it is required that we have the maritime domain awareness. We are aware of the areas in which we claim to be part of our territory. So these are the things that we, Malaysia, we do. We have to know, and of course, we comparatively the size of our armed forces. So we utilize the whole services, especially the Navy and Air Force, using radar and all those things. So we may not show our presence the same way that China is using. They have fleets and they have many ships and that kind of thing. But like I said, we are firm. The area that we claim, it is non-negotiable, although we have close relationship with China.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. Now, we got a very short time, 10 minutes left. Well, we got a few more questions we want to touch before going into the Q&A. So perhaps very short answers from the rest of you guys. Let me start with Elina first. Now, Malaysian government tend to have quite a muted approach when it comes to South China Sea, because if you compare Malaysia's, every time there's issue over South China Sea, Malaysia's response has been very quiet, as opposed to, for example, Philippines, which is a lot of media coverage. And do you think that Malaysia's more muted approach right now is still advantageous?
For the head of economics of an organization, I think you're masquerading as a defense strategist right here with your questions. Does our muted response still work? That's a very hotly debated topic because the situation is changing at sea. There are escalations that have been going on, particularly in the past few months, between the Philippines and China that could impact us. YB, if I may, it's not just maritime domain awareness. I think there's a lot of things going on in cyberspace that are intersecting with what's going on in the maritime space that we may need to be having more serious discussions about. So the problem has become more complex. Whether we continue to take this muted approach is something that the government agencies as well as other stakeholders will need to discuss. It's worked so far for us. I am not sure that this will continue to work for us, particularly if the parties are going to continue to be more assertive in their claims. And it's not just about China, by the way, right? It's ASEAN countries also having overlapping claims with each other that we need to resolve.
All right, thank you. So perhaps, Dr. Gurney, just quick response from you. if you look at in terms of the Belt and Road Initiative so far, it's a lot of, few of the BRI projects actually has either stalled or cancelled. Does it mean that, you know, right now China's grip over ASEAN or China's influence over ASEAN, is it waning, do you think, or is it still there, or do you think this is something that, you know, ASEAN countries still need to be worried about?
Thank you. Before I answer that question, I want to ask one more question, right? Because what is a Belt and Road project, right? Because I've seen quite a lot of Chinese businesses visited them, site visits, right? And most of them are either very, very pro-BRI, or they won't terang-terang say, hey, I don't like BRI, I don't like the principles of it, I do not like it, I'm not part of BRI. Yeah? So if you use that logic, then we can define as Chinese finance projects. If you use that logic, Chinese finance projects, then if you just look at Malaysia and ASEAN, then it's very clear by now that very few are considered successful, very few. Most are mediocre. Some are just not nice, right? So that's the dynamic. And I think that also applies to most businesses, most investment decisions that we make, right? The 20-80 rule. So, you know, 20% will do well, 80% not so well, right? And I don't think the Chinese are better than us than in gaming the 20-80 rule. I think they'll be more or less the same, and the projects will reflect that. Thank you.
All right, okay. So let us move on to the Q&A questions here. In fact, I can see that we have 18 questions, so it's quite a lot. So perhaps very short questions. But the first question here, I don't quite understand. Perhaps if you can listen to this and perhaps you can understand. So the first question is that in semiconductor context, how ASEAN positioning the region's product and what the barrier and consensus can see in terms of military technology sovereignty chip? Okay, that question perhaps needs to be, I mean, whoever posed that question, they got 8 likes here, so it's the highest likes in the question, but I think you need to re-sentence that question for us to actually understand a bit better. Okay, to move on to the next question, China's intrusions and sabotage strain ASEAN nations. Would stronger joint military forces better address these shared challenges? Perhaps, YB, you can answer that?
The question is China.
Okay, so would ASEAN stronger joint military exercises more can combat the China?
No, I think yes, we accept the fact that there are challenges, there are overlapping claims, there are issues and problems in the South China Sea, but I think diplomacy is also not dead. I think most of the countries within ASEAN, we accept the fact that China is our neighbor. It is a big country, strong economically, technologically advanced. We have to live with China. We want to live in a peaceful manner, or we want to live in a situation where we have continuous problems and hostility. So I believe that although, yes, we admit that there are conflicts, there are challenges, especially in managing the issues of the overlapping claim in the South China Sea. We also have a good relationship bilaterally, and with Malaysia as the chairman of ASEAN and the close relationship that we have with China, we can help steer that this region, we will not face any conflict.
Right.
So that's all I can say. Militarily, it is not a solution, but it does not mean that we should not look into military. We must strengthen our military so as we will be respected. But it is not the answer to all our problems.
Okay, so there's a very interesting question here which actually touches on Myanmar. We didn't touch on Myanmar just now. The question is that, looking inwards in ASEAN, what is the potential of a Myanmar de-membership given its military government? Will ASEAN continue to sweep it under the rug? And perhaps this question perhaps open for anybody. Who actually would like to answer? Should we maintain Myanmar within the ASEAN as a member?
I'll go first. So I've actually been on record to say that we should suspend Myanmar, at least for the time being, because Myanmar is a hugely intractable issue that no single country, no single organization is going to be able to resolve without the participation of the Myanmar people themselves. And at this point, we as in ASEAN, the organization, but also the people, have lost a great amount of credibility with the Myanmar people themselves. And my argument is that we should suspend Myanmar from the ASEAN family until we can move forward in a way that accords with the wishes of not just the people, but the other parties involved in the whole Myanmar conflict. It's not just about the junta, it's not just about one party or the other, it's about getting everybody on the same page as much as possible to move forward.
All right, okay, thanks. So, I have a question here talking about the Palestine. So basically, given that the issue over the riots at the Wisma Transit, what does government plan on how to deal with the people there?
I didn't know that the question of Palestine will also come into this forum. Well, it is regrettable that this incident happened. As you know, when we bring them into our country, the purpose is for us to address their injuries and to look into their needs and requirements. And I'm happy to share that most of them has already recuperated from their injuries, and therefore currently the government is looking into ways, because that is also their request, for us to send them back home. But as you know, it is not directly sending them to Gaza or Palestine, because we need to go through Egypt, and this is where we have our challenges. We need to get the agreement of the Egyptian government. So negotiation with the Egyptian government will take some time, but we are committed, as requested by them, to send them back home. And we hope that they understand that it will take time and they will not resort to do what they have done to bring their message to us. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. Okay, so some questions here regarding BRICS. It said that, you know, BRICS is not a legal binding organization. So like if you do a FTA, it'll be legally binding, or such as RCEP. How could Malaysia be benefited from joining BRICS? And perhaps this question I can extend it to Dr. Goni or Elena. Basically, the question is, what is the gain coming from joining BRICS? I mean, it's not a fixed free trade agreement, and how can we capitalize on joining BRICS? If it's not purely for political factors, if it's for economic factors, what benefit can we get?
The most immediate thing that you gain is by joining, because if you don't join, you lagi no chance, right? No, at least you have some. You may not be the original, time's up. You may not be the original cast, but at least you have a foot in a door like that, right? No.
So you mean it's purely for kiasu factor, lah?
Not that bad, but no. My point is, you would rather be in than out, right? And the membership could grow, right? Right now it might appear a bit random, right? All of us is like no common interest and all those, but this was what we said about 10 or 15 years ago. But now the membership has grown. Right. Still kind of random, but better than last time, right? And if you don't want to be in, then how, right? Right. Better be in.
I think apart from what we have said on BRICS, I think through BRICS, we can look into the demand and opportunities in areas which are different from the G7 economy. So in BRICS, we are focusing more on energy market, raw materials, and investment in infrastructure development, which may not be able, not provided by the G7 economies. So it opens up new areas for collaboration. And with the chairmanship of ASEAN, we will be able to bring BRIC countries into ASEAN and contribute to our development.
Okay, and with that, time is up. So with that, we are going to close our session today. Thank you, Mr. Panelists, for your contribution, and thank you everyone for attending the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.